Yeah, I know, the part that we loathe the most, the rules. So initially, when Fate was just starting out, Nasu was laying out the framework for what a servant is supposed to be. He gave them containers, he gave them specific powers and skills that align with their lore, and then he gave them parameters. But just like any magical series that's out there, rules are meant to be broken. So that's where we end up a lot of the time. Right now we're gonna dive into the parameter side of things. There's 6 base parameters for each servant, all of them being either ranked, unranked, or something that's undefined. For the first parameter, we got strength. This is pretty straightforward. The servant's bodily might in terms of power. And for the first person we're looking at, y'all gotta stop playing with the man Asterios out of Okeanos, coming in with A++ strength. During the chapter, Asterios was able to pick up Francis Drake's entire ship, the Golden Hind, solo. No help at all. And if you look at how much this ship is documented to weigh, it's at least 100 to 150 tons, which is insane. You got Sigurd in Lost Belt 2. Who can forget when Sigurd pulled up on us, his strength being A+. Dude picked up the entire Shadow Border and tossed it like a game of football. The Shadow Border has all types of additional weapons, it has a huge size, and it's got people on it. It could probably amount to 2 or 3 tanks on its own. Take that into consideration. That's 100 to 150 tons also. And I gotta point out that Suitor's possession has nothing to do with this because Sigurd is where the physical strength is coming from. So that's all on him. Again, very impressive. You got Kets, initially from Babylonia. So for Kets, she comes out and proves something that might be a bit misleading when it comes to parameter ranks. Just because your strength is lower does not mean that you're weak exactly. Kets clocks in at around B strength. That's lower than Sigurd, and that's lower than Asterios. And she was still able to pick up Marduk's colossal axe and throw it for miles. Again, this axe is stated to weigh as much as an entire city. The city of Eridu and the city of Uruk. Mind you that Kets is only 141 pounds, by the way. So here we have a servant of lower strength demonstrating feats that's better than the ones that are high. But again, there's a lot of inner working things with her character that's going on. For one, Kets is one of the closest servants to a full-scale deity that didn't get their power shafted, nor did she require a physical body like Ishtar and Ereshkigal, and she still maintained a proper stat sheet. And that's just the nature of her being a primordial spirit, and also the fact that the magical energy in the air of Babylonia was true ether, which allows for greater mystery. But it does get worse than that. King Protea being our upper echelon. She has EX strength, and it's been said that she can destroy entire planets if she's left unattended. Yes indeed, it really gets like that. So we definitely got to get a servant parameter tier list going, but I'm just going to be giving these few examples. Our second parameter is endurance. How much damage can a person withstand? That being the person itself and not like their move blocking them or their armament. We already know by lore that Herc temporarily held up the world in the place of Atlas. He's extremely strong. And in the story, we get something that sort of rivals this in terms of defense. In LB2, he was called out to help withstand an attack that was capable of destroying the entire Lost Belt. That Lost Belt being Scandinavia. This means that although he was being reinforced at the time, he physically held back the entire sub-region of Scandinavia just by leaning against it. And then he turned around and did the same thing with Artemis's arrows. His endurance is A rank. If you see somebody tank a hit like this, it's time to pack your bags. We are done. There's nothing else to be said. You got the off-screen fight that Ku had against Gil, where it's shown that Ku had his entire chest blown open and continued to do battle regardless. But his endurance is only C rank, which is average really. So a lot of that is thanks to the fact that he had battle continuation. The same way that I mentioned Emil was keeping up with Ku and Sasaki due to his eye of the mind, you can also make up for endurance in the same way with the right skill set. And that just goes for parameters in general. So being of a low and average scale doesn't count you out for good until you see the rest of what they have going on. You got Mash. Again, we all know that Mash can block pretty much anything that you throw at her. She's only a demi-servant variation of Galahad, not even the full thing, and she still gets a lot done. In fact, she says that being a demi-servant helps her in endurance. And it says a lot that she still has A-rank endurance when it's presented as if the shield is doing most of the work. She's unbothered by extreme temperatures, low or high. She's had her entire body set on fire by a demon god pillar. Sherlock mentioned that if Suitor scorched the lost belt, he could have scorched the entire thing. She still would have survived. When she blocked one of Suitor's attacks, even though she blocked it, she was still submerged in the heat. Da Vinci comparing this to being drowned in lava, and she just took it straight on. This is the capabilities of A-rank endurance. Service taking on 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit worth of heat like nothing, and she's not the only one. Next up, we got agility, that being your quickness and your speed of reaction. So it's two things factored in one, basically the fastest service. I always love to point back to Ushi when she fought against Gorgon in Babylonia. She's got A+, and she's casually dodging Gorgon's hits all throughout the area. Despite her size, despite her speed, despite her massive power, she couldn't tag Ushi. It was amazing. Achilles. We already know Achilles is credited for being the fastest hero of humanity, easily a top servant. We've seen him blaze through entire fields of enemies, and the shockwaves alone was crushing everything that was around him. This is before he even gets in his chariot. You know, catching mock arrows at point blank. Just a third of his speed was better than Atalanta at her best, back when he was weakened, just to show the gap. He also has A+. Richard, my guy, a servant where the gift just keeps on giving. We've seen his speed on numerous occasions, his interaction with Enkidu, the ones that he had with Gil and Heracles. He even had Heracles, a being that's higher than him, a demigod, saying, I might not be able to keep up with that dude. He's kind of nice. He has a very extreme case where the longer he does battle, the faster he goes. So his agility changes, but overall in rank it's an EX. Next we got luck, which is the quality of one's luck. I gotta go back to one of the oldies. You know, when Saber survived Ku's Gaybold. Watching it the first time around, it might have led you to believe, oh, that's plot armor, when it was really her luck stat over his, plus her instinct skill. The only issue with that scene is when you do that for her, and then another servant comes in with good luck, and they don't get that same type of leeway because from a writing standpoint, you have some type of point to get across. That's where the inconsistencies come in. I'm here for the story anyway, so I don't really care. But if it's not really that bad and it doesn't take away from the point that you're trying to make altogether, I really don't mind it. BB, for instance, from the extroverts, she has EX luck. If her complete rule over the far side of the moon wasn't enough, you have the fact that she was fortunate enough to gain the 10 Crowns title. This 10 Crowns title puts her in the same domain as an Earth Mother Goddess, embodying the role of the Potni of Theron. You know who else is an Earth Mother Goddess? Tiamat. Just to put that into perspective. You see how quick that goes bad? So it says a lot when most of the time when all eyes are against her in both CCC and LGO, she still finds a way to make a decent conclusion, thanks to her luck. Maeve is another interesting one. Her luck is EX. Throughout the story in chapter 5, Maeve hardly gets involved like she could, and she doesn't really fall victim to the consequences of her actions until the end of the story. And by that point, it doesn't even matter. She summoned Kualter, and despite her not being a better fighter than him, her luck is what helped her survive. You got mana, or your magical energy. How much magical energy can this person handle? Usually this is best for mages or somebody that's capable of being one. Going back to Fate Stay Night, we already know how Medea was coming. She's got A+. From the time the story started, she summoned her own servant. She was sapping energy from all the people in the city back to Riodo. She was getting into fights at the same time and holding her own. Keep in mind that Shiro and Rin were jumping her. She couldn't bring Sasaki with her. And she's even made note that she had enough energy to take all the servants in her possession and still be okay. I mean, a lot of that speaks for itself. From the Oku event, we know that Kama was outright able to turn an entire temple into a false dimension, where she was pretty much playing with us the entire time. Having access to an infinite amount of clones, an immeasurable amount of energy, she does have A+ in mana, all while being universal and practically invulnerable. And this is before implementing her beast form. For the Noble Phantasm, which would be the strength of the Noble Phantasm that you own, we gotta look at Enkidu. Enkidu was able to hold down Tiamat and Gugalana with his chains. I want you to understand how insane this is. Tiamat is scaled to be 74 million square kilometers in size. Her size was relative to the body of water she started in, which was the Indian Ocean. So at a point, she ended up being the size of the Indian Ocean, and he was holding all of that down with just his chains. And she could have kept growing. Not to mention that we know that he did Gugalana the same way. He's just different, I'm sorry. He has A++. Edmond Dantes with his Phantasm in First Chateau d'If. When you look at the agility of Dantes, he only comes in at a C rank. But when you look at his Phantasm, which goes up to A+, this allows him to move so fast that he escapes the locks of time and space itself. And is further supported by the fact that he's one of the only ones that can freely walk through timelines without our help, without being transported. And that's before you get to his transcendent flames that negate immortality. I will say that I am trying to leave the Grands out of this one. We already know they're strong. It doesn't really speak to anything to include them right now. Now, the next thing that we got to look at is the parameter bars themselves. And we do have a chart here. This is just something that Nasu gave as an example. There's number guys that can go along with the ranks. So starting off with E, you'll see that the base rank doesn't give you all that much. You're barely on the boards. And the more you go up, you'll get 10 points for each rank relative to its efficiency. One of the few interesting things about this is that if you notice, there's a plus and minus field, and they have a lot more weight than you might think just looking at them. A plus sign can value as double of that rank. So at C rank, just one plus can put you above B and A at their base. So in a lot of scenarios, a C plus can really be better than an A. The higher you go up in rank, the more value that the plus has. For example, when you get up to A rank, instead of it being 30, it will be 50. So it will be 50 for every plus that you have. Now I know the first thing that you might think of is, okay, if the plus was just going to make them stronger anyway, why didn't you just give them the base rank? And Nasu points out that this is only a temporary boost and it doesn't have to come out. It can boost up to that level. It goes back and forth. It means that that servant treads the line in terms of that level of power. He says that a minus, on the other hand, is the same way, but they don't have a numerical value. So it's not -50, it just means that they're unstable. And as I mentioned before, EX is just something that can't be quantified. It can mean that it's better than everything else, but that doesn't always have to be the case. For example, Tota, his ability to generate rice is also EX. Does that mean that he's gonna beat Excalibur by throwing rice at it? Hell no. But it does mean that he probably makes so much that it's not even worth putting a rank to it. And the undefined is just like it sounds. People like Bibi, who has a star as her rank, it can be valued. People like Sasuke and Emiya, who don't have actual phantasms, their ranks are also undefined. You have cultural spears, aka the lands where the servant is summoned in. We've always talked about that. This greatly affects the parameters. There's a reason that Japan quote unquote barred Japanese servants from being in the war. When you do that, you end up with people like Oda Nobunaga from Type Redline, who entered the previous war and survived into the one that's happening right now, just off the boost. Don't get it twisted. Nobu is a great servant, but with territorial advantage, this easily puts her at top levels. Just use Vlad as an example from Apocrypha, who's out here hanging with people like Karna, which normally should be impossible. This is why Heracles can't be summoned in Greece. At least if they were hosting a normal war, it's outright cheating. He's already a threat in Japan as is. Most people only have the intentions on jumping him. There's been conversations with Nasu involving the strength of Tamamo. He said himself that Tamamo is one that stands above all. Each one of her tails multiplies her power by 9. Normally, she only has 3 at best. And the way he framed it is that if she had all her tails, it would be times 81. Times 81 the power that she has now, which is top tier when she comes as a Amaterasu. So you can just imagine the stat sheet for that. Over 380 million in terms of raw power. This puts her above the White Titan, and look how far she is from an A rank servant. She just blows them out the water. But yeah, we'll get into the master stuff a bit later.